And I have 6 o'clock. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Wattsburg Area School District, where we are student-centered and future-focused for a world-class education. We have 2 committee meetings tonight prior to our board meeting. 6 o'clock is the Finance Committee meeting for the purpose of reviewing the local audit, and 6:30 a curriculum committee meeting for the purpose of discussing a research project. I would just like to remind the audience of our format for committee meetings. We'll have a presentation, and then we'll have board discussion, and then we will have citizens comment. When the time comes for citizens comment, I would ask that you submit your name for the question and answer feature, and then we will call on you for your comment. Please be reminded not to use the question and answer or chat feature during our meetings unless you are objecting to a perceived violation of the Sunshine Act or unless you're recognized by the president to speak. After board discussion, I'll open up for citizens comment, and that's the time to use that Q&A. At this time, I would like to recognize the Finance Committee Chairperson, Mr. Marty Pushchak, to call our meeting to order. Mr. Pushchak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I'll call the meeting to order and turn it over to the firm that handled our local audit, Dave Datana. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, thank you very much for having us tonight. And our plan tonight is to walk you through the 2019-20 audit report and do that via the graph analysis, which is really intended to provide a highlight of the audit for this current year. You'll notice throughout the presentation, there's references to page numbers, and those page numbers are actually referring to the actual audit report, which is roughly 65 pages long. And so, you know, our goal tonight is to give you an overview of both the financial section and also the reports, and then open it up to any questions any of the members might have. So I'm going to kick it off by sending it over to Jeremy Smith. He is a manager from our firm and played a key role in the audit. And so he's going to lead us through some of the discussion, and I'm going to chime in.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, first I want to say thank you, Vicki and the staff. Obviously, we're typically on site for the audit. So because of this pandemic, we've had to do, Vicki actually and the staff had to scan us everything. So we really appreciate it. You know, the fact that we're still meeting in January like normal, considering these circumstances. So I want to give a big shout out to her. But I'll go through the PowerPoint, yeah, and if there's anything I go through too quick, or if you have any questions, just please feel free to ask. Can everybody see this okay, first of all, as well? Okay. Oops, sorry, started off on the wrong page. The first I'm going to go over is the first of our 3 audit reports. And this is the first one. This basically states your job is to ensure the financial statements are in accordance with the generally accepted accounting principles. Our job as auditors, is basically why we're hired, is to express an opinion on it. And we've issued an unmodified, clean opinion, the best opinion we can issue. So good job once again. The next report is a report on internal control in accordance with the government auditing standards. And in this report, we don't express an opinion. In this report, it's basically stating that we're required as part of the audit to gain an understanding of the controls in place at the, so your cash receipts, your disbursements, your payroll cycles. And we do that in order to help design audit procedures for the actual audit and help express an opinion on the first audit report. Now, if we come across things we're required to bring your attention, or also bring in the report. So we do have 2 findings. They're both findings that we've had in prior years, and I'll kind of briefly go over these. The first one is this adjusting journal entries and required disclosure. Well, this finding kind of encompasses a couple things. First of all, as Dave mentioned, that financial statement is a 65-page document. In the perfect world, you would give us that audit report and we would audit it. Well, due to a cost benefit analysis and also a lot of the changes in the government auditing standards, we prepare that financial statement for you. So that is one part of it. The other part of it is also we assist in some of the journal entries, but we also convert it from a short-term basis, which your general fund and the other funds are on, to a long-term basis. So there's a lot of GASB standards that we assist in as far as disclosures and required journal entries. So that is a very common finding that we see typically across our school districts that we have audited, and also in non-school districts as well. The next finding is related to segregation of duties. This is the payroll issue we had in prior years. Now we were required to keep it in there, and it's due to a few things. First of all, we presented last year in January. So, you had about 6 months to kind of implement that. Well, that's not really enough to get rid of it over the course of the 1920 fiscal year. I think the other thing about this finding is also due to COVID, a lot of the things that we recommended in years and in the prior year to get done, there was a wrench thrown into that, as well as we had some retirements and a change in personnel. So I think we did start implementing a lot of these procedures. We still just continuously working on that. So that's why that comment's still there. The next report is the report and uniform guidance, and this is due to we had received over $750,000 in federal awards. So we're required as part of the audit process to test at least 40% of those. And it's really your three largest federal grants, which is your Title I, the IDA, and your free and reduced lunch and breakfast. This year we looked at your Title I and your free and reduced, and and we had no findings. That's really good. Good job to everybody that's involved in that. It's a very complex and strict requirement from the federal government. There's a few thousand-page document that has all the rules that need to be followed. So the fact that we followed all those is good. So good job there. Any questions on the audit reports? Okay. Next, I'll briefly go over some of the GASB 34 numbers, and this is converting your fund financials, which are on a short-term basis, and into a long-term basis. So I'll just kind of touch on a couple of the significant long-term assets and liabilities that we have here. So when you think about it, we had about $44 million in total assets. Well, this is where you kind of see your capital assets, your land, your building, your property and equipment. And of that $44 million in total assets, about $28 million are tied up in the capital assets. So $65 million, slight change from prior year. That was due to our ongoing capital construction projects, which were about $3.5 million in 1920. The biggest change, biggest amount here you'll see in the liability section is related to really two components here. First, our debt, which is about a little lower than 26 million of it. Now that's an increase from the prior of about $2 million. And the reason is we refunded our debt in 1920, refunded about roughly 5.7 million of it. But we also incurred, as part of that refunding, an additional $3.1 million in additional proceeds. So that's the reason why the debt increased this year. Now, it didn't go up to quite 3 million because we had our normal principal payments, but the additional proceeds was to help fund our capital projects that we had going on. So that's roughly 38% of the debt, the liabilities right there. The other part is our PSER system. Now, we've talked about this in years past related to the GASB 68 pension system. Just touched on it real quick. It's still underfunded. It's about 55% funded this year. Last year is 54%. So there was actually a decrease in our liability of about $1 million due to that extra percent of increasing. But overall, it's still grossly underfunded, and that's just our share of it. So really where that kind of impacts you guys on your day-to-day operations, because this is long-term basis, it's not something right now, is the PSERS contribution rate that we're required to pay on our employees continuously goes up. So in 1920, it was 34%, a little over 34%. 1819, it was about 33.4%. So it was an increase of 2.5% from the prior year. Now 2021, it's starting to even out a little bit. It's gone up to about 34.5%, which is an increase of 0.6% versus the prior year. So we'll still see that increase in our PSERS contribution expense, but it's starting to even out. And I think that's in part due to how they changed our employees' retirement. Now we got more like a 401k for our new employees that we're contributing to try to even this share out. So that's all we had on the long term, and then we'll kind of get into the general fund. This is the one you kind of see, during your monthly board meetings, and the one you kind of discuss all the main fund here. This is your total assets, liability, and fund balance. As you can see, the total assets was down a little bit this year, and the liabilities are slightly up, but our total fund equity had a deficit of about $1.6 million this year, and we'll kind of do that in a couple slides. But all these other things were just basically due to operations we did this year, but also just due to timing from that 6/30 year end. Now, this is the category of our total equity, our fund balance, and I just wanted to point out here, as you can kind of see, the last 2 years or 3 years, our committed fund balance, we were setting fund balance aside to fund this future capital project. And as you can see, this year we used it all, most of it. We have about 290,000 as a 6/30/20, and I think we've probably used the rest of it since to finish up the capital project. But now you can kind of see that's back down to kind of a nothing category. So I just wanted to point that out where we're at. Next, we'll get into the total revenues, and overall, you can kind of see there's a nice about $1,060,000 increase from the prior year, and which is the percent. And most of that is tied up into our taxes. We increased our millage rates. We also had some increase in property assessments, and that was roughly $384,000 of that increase in revenue. We also had an increase in our tuition revenue this year, just changed the way we're billing from past practices. State aid was another increase of $145,000. We also received roughly $100,000 in COVID grants. And then the other big chunk of it was about $320,000 due to our insurance proceeds related to the payroll fraud that we received. So overall, about $1,060,000 increase in our total revenue. Sorry. So next, we're going to get in our total expenses, and you can kind of see there's a big increase, but I kind of want to explain this a little bit. These last 2 years, in 1920 and in 1819, we moved some funds over to the capital project fund to kind of fund the ongoing capital project. Well, they count as transfers or expenses in the general fund. So this year we transfer about $3.2 million, which is included in this $28 million. Last year in 1819, we contributed another $1 million, which cut it out. If you back that, so we had 25,409,000 in 1819, you back out the $1 million, we ended about $24.4 million in expenses. This year, that $28,337,000, if you back out the $3.2 million in transfers to the capital project fund for the capital project, we're about $25.1 million in expenses overall. So when you can kind of compare those, our expenses without transfers, we actually increase our expenses about $694,000 or 2.85%. So pretty reasonable versus what it appears. And really what that came down to is mostly our salaries and employee benefits. So our salaries went up roughly 2%. That's, a stated raise in our union contracts, which is roughly $200,000 of it. And also our employee benefits. And now we mentioned PSERS rates increased, and also our health insurance rates. Plus we had some more people on the family coverage, would cost more a little bit too. So total salaries and employee benefit increase from the prior year was about 575,000. And another 65,000 increase was due to that refunding of debt. So nothing else. There was there were some other little changes here and there, but for the most part, a pretty standard normal increase in expenses. So at the end, we'll kind of see here. So as I mentioned, we had a deficit of $1.6 million this year. But that included that transfer expense. We backed that out. We would have a surplus this year of about $1.6 million. Now that also includes insurance proceeds, one-time insurance proceeds. You back that out of it, we would end up about $1.3 million if you kind of compare this year versus 18, 17, 16. Last year we had 250,000, which included a transfer of $1 million. That gets us up about $1.2 million. So I think when you try to compare, I know there's a lot of reconciliations there, but we actually had a fairly good year once again. If you compare it just to prior year, backing out transfers, backing out insurance proceeds, our revenue sources were up $740,000 from prior year. Our expenses were up $700,000. So we did about $40,000 better than 18-19. And then overall, our fund balance is, yep.
Just going to have you flip up one page to the previous page and might give the board a perspective. So this gives you kind of an analysis of their revenue in the blue and the expenditures in the pink or the red. And really that gap between the blue and the red is, if how we did financially. But as Jeremy has kind of alluded, then also a big factor is the transfers. And if you back out the transfers, really for the most part, your operations for 17, 18, 19, and 20 have all hovered, around the 1.3 to 1.4, 1.5 million dollar range. So very consistent over that period of time. And, again, basically what's happened is it's allowed you to send money to help pay for your capital projects, which if you didn't have those level of increases in the general fund, you probably would have had to take out some more debt. So it's really a matter of, you had positive operations, you took that money and sent it over to the capital, used it to lessen the amount of debt that you had to incur related to the projects that are currently ongoing.
So next we'll briefly talk about the food service fund. Kind of go right into the revenues. Obviously this year, COVID kind of affected a lot of how we served our meals. As of March, we weren't allowed to serve meals on site anymore, and then we kind of had to do this remote base. So overall, revenue's down about 70,000. And that's simply due to a lot less meal serves, a lot less a la carte sales that we typically would have. Actually, our sources, due to we were able to serve those COVID meals, they were also reimbursed at a higher rate. So that kind of helped offset some of those other sale decreases. Now, when you go to expenses, you see the revenue went down significantly, but our expenses actually went up. Well, we still paid our employees just like normal, even though we didn't have those revenue sources. But we also had some additional packaging costs related to preparing these meals for COVID. We also bought some additional equipment, steamers, things like that during the year, which kind of kept those costs a little above the prior year. Now, when we kind of look at overall, right here, we ended up about a $100,000 deficit this year. Last year, we're break even, and as you can kind of see, the previous 4 years, we were about break even. The good news is we still have about a little over $400,000 in fund balance in our school lunch, which is a very healthy school lunch surplus there. And, I think it's just a good job of how it's been run over these past few years that we can still take a loss like that. And we're still spending money to continuously improve our cafeteria through equipment each and every year. So, COVID kind of affected how it went overall this year, but it's still, we're in a healthy financial position here.
Just going to jump in, Jeremy, on this. So it'll be really interesting to see how the 2021 year pans out as well, because the one positive as a result of the COVID is every meal that the district serves is currently being reimbursed 100% at the federal free rate. And that rate is actually a higher rate than you would actually be reimbursed if it was a paid meal or a reduced meal. So from an economic standpoint, on a meal by meal basis, you're generating probably the highest level of revenue per meal than you ever have. And it's really a facet of, how many meals can we serve during the course of COVID, if we're remote, if we're in school, if we're, serving lunches out to the families. All that is going to be a major impact as to where the 2021 school year pans out. And, I think when we kind of look at schools this past year on a school by school basis, it was all over the board. Some schools sent a breakfast and lunch out to every single family in the district on every day, including weekends. Other districts had sites throughout the region where families could pick it up. And we actually had a couple schools that didn't do anything during COVID. So it's a real different mix as far as how schools are doing financially. And it's just something, to continue to evaluate for the 20 to 21 year.
And then we got our last page here. This is our management letter comments. These are just things that we let you know that are upcoming, whether they're new accounting standards, things that we noticed during the audit, or just general recommendations to something to consider. The first one, I'll kind of touch on some of these new ones. The first one, capital assets. Years past, we've had a comment about, we've had a fixed asset appraisal done since 2008. You guys have went and had one done this year by Industrial. Well, one of the things that they came back with, and they gave us an updated report. The updated report basically said our value of our capital assets, net of depreciation, was about $10 million. Well, currently what we have on the financial statements is about $28 million. So there's a significant difference, $18 million. So we have kind of a comment to, we're gonna have to kind of work with them to try to get the most accurate number, because we only had $44 million. And if we wait on total assets, we take out $18 million to adjust it to the report. That makes our financial position look a lot worse. Some of it is just they had some estimates in there as far as what our buildings cost. The equipment, these kind of make sense, but it's just another recommendation to kind of look into it, just because it does have a financial impact, a significant impact on our district. So we did got the first step of getting an updated appraisal, but now we have to kind of work with them to get the most accurate number. Next one, C, future governmental accounting standards. These are the same two standards we talked about in prior year, but due to COVID, they both got postponed another year. So just wanted to let you guys know the one's upcoming, and I think PDE's been kind of letting us know how we're going to account for that, the student activities. There's a couple new ones here, COVID-19. This kind of relates to, there's a lot of CARES Act money that we've been allotted up through now. I think we might get another allotment this upcoming, and just due to its federal money, it's new money that we typically haven't seen, just to keep an eye out on any trainings, making sure that we're following all the rules, guidelines with those funds, just because they are new, something that we're not used to. Another one that kind of came up is this federal programs. And, you know, as I talked about, the federal government's very strict with this compliance supplement. It's a few thousand-page document that has all these rules, regulations that we need to adhere to for each of these federal programs. And one of the things that you kind of, when you're reading through those, is there's an emphasis on our processes, our controls, and how we're documenting those, but also what the review process is. So it's just another thing that we need to try to, I think, beef up. And this was something that we applied to all the schools that we had. I think a lot of these things are stuff we're doing, but we just don't have it written yet. So it's just an ongoing process, just to make sure that we keep sticking to those guidelines as they upcoming. But that's all I really had. You know, do you guys have questions, numbers, any of the comments, anything?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to thank Dave and Jeremy and their firm for conducting this audit and assisting us with this process, and also to recognize Vicki and Ken in the business office for this clean audit. This reflects a healthy financial position that the district is in, and it demonstrates that the district continues to operate in a fiscally responsible manner. So at this time, we'll have board discussion regarding the audit.
Mr. President, quick question.
Mr. Pushchak, yes, please.
Yeah, Dave, if you could, unless I missed it, could you just comment on the overall opinion of the audit and what that means?
Sure. The overall opinion is really our chance to provide an opinion on not only the numbers that are included in the financial report, but also the disclosures. The disclosures are a key part of your financial statements, and our opinion is unmodified that the financial statements are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, along with the disclosures that are included in the report.
Thanks, Dave. That's what I wanted to hear. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board or further discussion regarding the local audit?
It's Josh. I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Paris.
Jeremy or Dave, could you go into a little more detail about the capital asset? We went from down to $10 million in value on our buildings and property and equipment. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, so that's what industrial appraisal said. We didn't adjust it yet because it was such a significant adjustment. So right now we still kept the old records kind of the way they are. We did make a slight adjustments based off equipment because that's something that's kind of reasonable. But yes, they estimated that our total cost of our capital assets were about 34 million. And this year and years past, we've recorded about 49 million. Now depreciation, they said it was about 24 million. We've had it on the books for about 21 million. So the net, what we've had on this year is 28 million, and we've kept it based on our the old asset appraisal, plus us keeping track of any new additions. But when they came in, they put some estimates on some values, and they kind of came with a net value of about, $10 million.
Yeah, just,
If I could jump in just real quick to tie into that, we have ongoing dialogue with, we've reached back out to the appraisal company to ask them to explain, why if they could substantiate why there's such a significant difference. We haven't had an audit in several years, so it's not uncommon for there to be some adjustment, but that just seems so large. So we're still talking and working with them to get them to either adjust what they've stated or work with the auditors to make sure that we understand what they're talking about.
Dr. Pushak, may I ask a question? This is Amanda.
Yes, Mrs. Farrell.
How does the renovations to the middle school factor into that number with the appraisal?
it's a good point. I can jump in and kind of expand on some of the previous discussions. So ultimately, when an appraisal company comes in, they, go throughout the buildings and they basically tag all the equipment, and, they don't go and try to find the invoice related to the specific equipment. They'll basically do an estimate to say, well, how much do we think that asset was purchased for and how old is it? And then let's depreciate it based on what we expect the initial cost to be in the depreciation. So as Jeremy mentioned, for the most part, that's, as long as we identify each asset, it's an estimate. We know what we have, and that's all pretty good. The harder part is the capital pieces of it. And I think your question is good, Amanda. The capital improvements that we just incurred, those are assets that are to be recorded at the costs that we put into them. And everything that we've incurred until it's placed in service just gets reported as a construction in progress. And then ultimately it gets depreciated. But I think, where we've seen differences in the past when there is a new appraisal is sometimes, we'll see that the company that comes in, they'll look at the building, maybe they'll look at different documents, but it really ultimately has to be not just what we purchased a building for, but all the additions that we incurred over time, that has to be capitalized as an asset and then ultimately depreciated. And I think that's, the piece where we think there really needs to be some more reconciliations to say, okay, how did you arrive at those numbers? Here's maybe some of the debt issuances that we've incurred specifically for capital projects. We issued a bond 10 years ago. We put $10 million into it. So we know darn well that was the amount that we had as far as the capital improvements that we made. So can we see it on the appraisal? Does the depreciation look reasonable based on when that debt was issued and the life of the project?
Will the stadium fall into kind of that same category or same procedure, I guess, of looking at how that all flows through?
Yeah, it'll be reported at the cost that the district incurred for all the improvements related to the stadium. So it's not, what the market value is, what we think we could get if we were to sell it. It's strictly for accounting purposes, the amount of money that we incurred to basically make those renovations to the stadium. So that'll be an asset. And then every single year from now forward, it'll be depreciated a little bit each year until ultimately it's fully depreciated.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the board or further discussion from the board regarding the local audit? Hearing none, once again, thanks to Dave and Jeremy for joining us tonight. Have a safe trip home. And we thank you. Mr. Pushak, anything else under finance for the finance committee meeting?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. We will close our finance committee meeting and we will open our curriculum committee meeting. The chair recognizes Mrs. Julie Pikevich, who's the chair of the curriculum subcommittee. Mrs. Pikevich.
Thank you, Dr. Pushchak. I'd like to call the curriculum meeting to order right now and turn it over to Mr. Berlin, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Berlin.
Hey, thank you. So we have a guest with us that's going to talk a little bit about a proposal that he has. His name's Jeff Staborski. He's a resident of the district, but he also does work with the Jefferson Society. And him and I started talking at the beginning of the pandemic, about the challenge of our rural area and the lack of high-speed internet. And he's proposing to do some research. We could have called this a technology committee meeting just as easily as curriculum, because those two things are becoming intertwined. So he's going to talk a little bit about some data he'd like to gather in our community and how that might get put to use to lobby for better internet connection with our legislators and the powers that be. So I'll turn things over to Jeff at this point.
Thanks, Ken. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your time. Do appreciate you letting me speak here. So as Ken mentioned, I reached out and talked to Ken. I had known Mr. Berlin for quite some time, just on a personal level, and now as a parent in the district with a kindergartner in Wattsburg area elementary and a 2-year-old who I can't wait to get out of this house by any means necessary. Looking forward to someday having him in the elementary center as well. So I actually was lucky enough. My employer sponsored a fellowship with the Jefferson Leadership or Civic Leadership Academy this year for myself. And the JCLA, for anyone who is unaware, is again, it's a Civic Leadership Academy, kind of a nonprofit think tank in Erie, Pennsylvania. And we explore all sorts of different avenues around civic leadership within Erie and Erie County and the surrounding areas as well. So, for example, our group fellowship project this year, we're putting on a small business lecture series, free to the public, where we're offering financial aid around PPP loans. We're having some an HR speaker from the Manufacturers Association come in to help small businesses address any HR issues they may be feeling or confronting within the pandemic, whether that be around employee policies, employee retention, interactions with customers, et cetera. So again, it's very civic minded, nonpartisan, and I was lucky enough to participate in what they call the Ramey Fellowship, which is an individual project focused on some form of civic leadership, again, kind of following the same criteria. So within that aspect, I decided to focus on the digital divide as it exists in the rural county. So one of our participants from 2 years ago, I think his name is Matt Weirl. He is a VP at VelocityNet, a for-profit internet services provider providing high-speed internet in Erie City proper. So that's all fiber connectivity. And he did a project around the digital divide, which encompassed things that not only said, the price of high-speed internet, but the access or accessibility to it, as well as the ability to use it, were kind of 3 of his main takeaways and points from his paper. So when talking with the resident in fellowship, Dr. Andrew Roth, who is chairing the Ramey Fellowship, he and I kind of came around the idea and kind of focused my paper or my proposal around Wattsburg Area School District, of which, of course, as a resident, I have a vested interest. And as a resident of Green Township, was very fortunate that Armstrong Cable just recently came through and wired up the township for high-speed internet. I can say that as a work from home, my wife and I both work from home full time. We're both Erie Insurance employees. The ease of access and speed has been instrumental to working from home, as well as having the kindergartner at home. We couldn't have done it without that. So I can only imagine what folks who are not as fortunate, who either can't afford to pay for it or don't have the accessibility or even know that the service exists. I imagine that's quite a struggle. So I've put together a survey that I was hoping I could use the district's communication channels to publish or to push out to the residents. And basically, it only focuses on ease and reliability of connectivity. I am in no way capable of measuring academic outcomes based on any sort of connectivity. That's out of my pay grade, out of anything that I could be considered a subject matter expert on. But what I can do is measure sort of the efficacy of what the experience is like for parents at home. So I believe there are 5 very distinct townships or residential classifications within the district, the 4 townships, as well as the city or borough of Wattsburg. And so the idea here would be to first ascertain where the resident lives, second, ascertain what type of connectivity that they have now, and then ascertain, do you know what's available? Do you have trouble with this connectivity? What's your overall experience level? And could you afford more if you wanted to? And there's a series of questions. I believe Ken has shared those out with you already. If not, I'm happy to provide that. I, of course, would ask that the board review and approve these questions. If there's any questions on why the question is being asked or the spirit behind the question, I'm happy to answer those additional questions as well. By no means is any personal data being collected from any resident. The data will actually be autonomized and tabulated, and then I will make that data available both to Wattsburg Area School District, both to the 5 distinct residential breakdowns within the district, and then I will be putting together a paper for consumption by the Jefferson Society, as well as an online digital presentation of those autonomized findings at a date to be set. And of course, I will share that with the board as well. And of course, any resident and anything within the district, welcome to consume that information as well. So the idea here is basically take a tabulation of the residents within Wattsburg, gauge their opinions of what that connectivity and reliability would be around. And then I have some materials that I can push out both at the state and local levels for what legislatures you can talk to, who to email at the state for grants or other programs around broadband access, as well as taking a look at what type of funding within the various townships or municipalities needs to get put in place to spearhead, again, additional high-speed access. Armstrong's agreement was actually partnered with the Green Township Supervisory Committee. Armstrong had a vested interest in going through Green because of some connectivity they wanted to establish between an Edinburgh location and their New York location. But as we all know, once you've run some fiber somewhere, it's very easy to connect to the next place. So I can't speak for the townships as to what they may do with this information, but certainly a plan as to what they could do and how they could do that will be part of that final presentation and paper. I do appreciate you listening to me. I know I've gone on and maybe used a lot of words in a short amount of time, but I'll now pause and take any questions you may have around anything I've spoken to so far.
Well, thank you, Mr. Staborski. I'm Andy Pushchak, the board president. Just wanted to thank you for thinking of your home district to propose conducting this research that would certainly provide information for the district and for the surrounding municipalities. So thank you in that regard. At this time, I'll open up for board discussion, questions or comments for Mr. Staborski. So the board.
Mr. President, question.
Yes, Mr. Blazer.
Thank you also, Mr. Cyborski, for working on this issue. I looked at those questions. I see Ken put it on the screen. It was a couple weeks ago when he sent this out to us. I know you asked about what type of internet connection individuals had before April. I guess I wondered if you were, I didn't see anything, I think, in the questions about speed. And I guess, it does tell you something about speed, whether they have dial-up versus, DSL or whatnot. But I guess I wondered if you had thought about asking about the actual speed individual households have available to them.
Sure, that's an excellent question. Thank you. So from my own technology background, I am an information technology professional at Erie Insurance. Prior to that, I had worked at the Northwest Tri-County Intermediate Unit for close to 9 years. as a technology professional. And prior to that, I had been at St. Vincent Medical Center. So based on the type of connectivity, I would probably be able to pin some sort of speed or more so reliability than just speed. So in other words, when talking about DSL, that is subject to phone interruption, as well as limited to, I think, a maximum of 5 megs a second, as the Verizon circuit only allows that in this area. Anything with cable modem or true fiber access, the speeds could be anywhere between 20 megs a second up to 500 megs a second. That centers more on how much a customer is willing to pay. And I wanted to stay away from truly financial questions, because I didn't want anyone to feel any sort of weird way, for lack of a better term, that around me poking at, how much are you spending on this? Because I don't feel that that's pertinent. More so around the reliability, fiber and cable modems have direct access back to generally a centralized hub. Those tend to stay online much longer. Of course, the district provides Wi-Fi hotspots. My household was actually on Wi-Fi hotspots, not district provided, prior to Armstrong coming in and laying the fiber background or backbone through Green Township. So I know the pain of a Wi-Fi hotspot, the weather conditions, how that affects it, time of day, when your data cap is hit. There's a lot of things there. So while I do certainly reflect that speed is a huge part of that, I don't think it's as important as the reliability of the connection. And again, if there was some sort of incentive program, either by the district, by the township, or even by the state around broadband access for at-home learning, then certainly people could explore those speed options or upgrades if they're even aware that they can do so. And that would be more on their own as a consumer, not so much as a parent of a student, if that makes any sense.
Yes, thank you. Just one more thing. I guess I do appreciate your work on this. It is certainly an enormous issue. And seeing at our work session last week the dollars that we're spending as a district on hotspots, and then hearing others tell us about their experience with those, which is varies, but is typically not great. It's a lot of money for the best we can do at this time. So anything that would improve that would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. That's my intention.
Dr. Pushek, it's Amanda. I have a couple questions.
Yes, Mrs. Farrell, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is definitely interesting. What format are you looking at sending the survey out in?
So I did speak with Mr. Berlin about that, and I will actually defer to him as to the best methods that he feels the district has used in the past. Again, my wife and I subscribe to the text alerts. We get our email alerts. We get our phone calls. And I think when the survey data went out around, will you require a hotspot for your students' home learning if the district would need to go to a red or yellow phase, we were able to get that information, answer it, send it right back in. I was going to follow the exact same format that is already in place. I feel parents are comfortable with that. They're used to it. It is from the district on official, if you will, letterhead, for lack of a better term. And so I want to stay within and utilize the district's resources in this regard to make sure that level of comfort is still there.
And then is there a number of responses that you're looking to get out of this?
So ideally, I hope every parent answers and says, I love it or I hate it. And this is why, I'm sure there's a lot of passion one way or another, or maybe one way and not so much passion the other within the responses. I would hope that if we could get even half of the residents to reply, especially with a smattering across the various municipalities, I would consider that a success. I think it would be very difficult to judge the efficacy of the survey if we only got 10 responses from one township and 250 from another, right? And I don't know how the population breaks down within the Wattsburg School District around those municipalities, but I would think we'd want to see some good smattering across. If the data came back and wasn't overly helpful, then I would take most of the location-based questions out of consideration for report and just report back on where we did get enough data that I feel that we could make a difference or make an impact.
And I apologize because I guess I didn't notice it if it was there. are you looking for just the township information, or are you going to ask people to give you like street address type information? How pinpoint are you going to try to be with that?
For right now, just the municipality. If the district wanted to pursue this information further, I would certainly be happy to help with that at a later date and time. However, my focus here is if a participant chooses to say, I live in this township and I have access to, for example, cable. Well, we know that there's only so much cable run. Maybe they're an outlier and they just happen to be on the right street or the right road that someone ran cable through there. So really pinpointing the home address doesn't tell me a whole lot about what their experience is going to be like. It's more, where do you live? What access do you have provided for you? If we have one municipality that the only thing they have are hotspots, that's a good enough piece of information right there that now we can focus on some of those tabulated answers and say, hotspot data in this township is very reflective of this experience. And maybe we have a couple people that are just outliers there, and that's okay. So.
Yeah, I can tell the board that when we've done surveys using Microsoft Forms or posted the links on the website, the response rate from our families has been very good. We probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of, and we've got like 1350 student population, and that breaks down to about 900 family units or so. And typically when we send out a survey, we'll get between 600 and 700 responses, which was very, very good for survey data.
Is there consensus? Yes, go ahead, Mrs. Pound.
Thanks, Jeff, for all this. It's going to be really good, I think. Couple questions and this might be for Ken. We have surveyed the parents a number of times on some of these questions that Jeff is asking, I believe. So is it possible to go through all of the surveys we've already sent and eliminate, if we already have the data, we can shorten the survey that Jeff is going to send, or do you want it to be fresh?
So look, Ken, before you answer, I'll jump in there. Ms. Pound, thank you. Nice to see you. Tara and I also co-workers at Erie. As you know, it is a small world. So I would actually like that data to go out again in this time. I've only been a district resident. Well, I've been a resident for 8 years now, actually 9. But my student has been enrolled in Wattsburg for 1. So I've only seen about 1 year of the communications from the school. So if there's old data, I think it's very important to note that, Armstrong first came in, I think it was in early spring/summer of 2019. I think most connectivity, the early adapters were established sometime in mid 2020. I'm sorry, mid 2019. They would have come in early 2018. We did not get connectivity until early 2020. And so I feel like the reason why I had singled out April in that survey was because, of course, that's when we now went home to online learning. And I feel that's a very important time point in a data study, because we're basically, you could have had, like, for example, my neighbor who has 1 student in Wattsburg High School, and he would not have needed, high speed, whether it was available to him or not. Well, of course, COVID comes. Now we're online learning almost full time last year. And so I know that my neighbor did sign up for Armstrong simply because of that fact when it actually did become available. So if I can keep that data bunched together, I think the COVID hit may have changed some household behavior. And so seeing it tabulated in kind of a row format, I think will be very beneficial for my analysis.
Okay, good. And then second question would be, is this really only for the school district and the parents, or is it for the entire community? Because I am willing to bet that you would have a higher rate of answering the survey if we were able to get it to the residents who do not have children.
Yeah, excellent question. A couple of problems there, and these solely live on my behalf. Being able to distribute that out to residents across all 5 municipalities, because I would still like to center around one one area of focus. Being able to distribute that out to all residents poses some problems, right? With the school, we already have kind of a defined segment of answerees with kind of a repeatable history or pattern that we know of response rates. Going out to all residents, I just don't have a feel for that. Additionally, being able to tabulate all residents, I feel might lose some of the importance of what the school and some local legislatures and what some state legislatures, if we can share this data constructively with them, I think that may hint at a couple of different things. You know, we're only talking about school age kids. So we're you know, for myself and my wife, you know, we're working full time from home. We have a kid with us sometimes from home. Our reliability and our connectivity is excellent, and I still get frustrated by the means of connectivity. And so I feel like folks who have kind of walked through this process with their students, you know, they kind of know at this point, oh, it's this darn tablet, or oh, it's my internet. And maybe they don't, and that's okay too. I think some of the survey responses will reflect some of that. Again, I would love to scope it out to all residents that live within Wattsburg School District. Hopefully, maybe there can be a part 2 to this someday, where we can take that further. But I feel because of the importance of education, especially within this weird and unique time with the pandemic, that we have an opportunity to really kind of show the importance to our online learners, AKA the entire district at this point, what this data really could mean. So sorry, long way to answer your question, but I just feel like once I increase too much scope, I'll lose sight of some of the importance of why we're looking at this the way we are, as well as we already have an established distribution method with a significant pattern of response rates already in place. And so easy piggyback for me to jump right on that.
Yeah, and I would echo that comment, that keeping it very focused on high-speed internet and how that how our students interact with it or don't. That data is going to be more useful when we pivot towards the state assembly and approach our representatives and say, hey, you know, we want to have a 21st century school district, a 21st century learning, but here's an obstacle. Here's how it affects our students, our kids. So I think that's going to be a better entry point with the data, rather than having, you know, a whole community-wide set of data, at least to start with.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Is there a consensus among the board, just due to time for our committee meeting? It's going to be over shortly. Is there a consensus among the board to go forward with having Mr. Styborski conduct this?
Yep, I'm perfectly good with it.
Yes,
I
I
agree.
support forward.
Okay,
Sounds
thank
good.
you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mrs. McClure, should we add a resolution to the agenda to approve this? Would that be appropriate for the board to take that action?
You could, yeah, in your public meeting, certainly.
So when we do the agenda approval, Mrs. Bekevich, could you add this to our agenda tonight?
Sure.
Board members object to that? Hearing no objections, then when we have our approval of the agenda tonight, we will add this item to approve Mr. Styborski to conduct his research project on the ease and reliability of the connectivity and report back to us with results. So with that, thank you very much, Mr. Styborski.
Thank you.
appreciate your time in attending our meeting. We do have to bring this committee meeting to a close so I can open the regular meeting at 7 o'clock. So our committee meeting for curriculum is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Please stay here. We will move into the full meeting at 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it is now 7 o'clock. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Wattsburg Area School District, where we are student-centered and future-focused for a world-class education. The regular board meeting of January 18th is now called to order on this holiday celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. At this time, I would ask everyone to please stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. May we have a roll call, please, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Blazer,
Present.
Mrs. Farrell,
Here.
Mrs. Lee,
Here.
Mr. Mattson,
Here.
Mr. Paris,
Here.
Mrs. Bekevich,
Here.
Mrs. Pound,
Here.
Mr. Pushcheck,
Here.
Dr. Pushcheck.
Here, thank you. I would just like to remind our attendees tonight, should anyone wish to address the board, I would ask you to use the question and answer feature. Please submit your name and your address, and you will be recognized for 5 minutes under guest and citizens comment. I also request that the attendees of the meeting do not use the question and answer, the chat feature, as a running monologue during the meeting. That is only to be used for a perceived violation of the Sunshine Act or when being called upon by the president. Thank you. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
This is Amanda, so moved.
Nicole, second.
Thank you. Are there any additions to the agenda tonight? Mrs. Bekevich, any additions to the agenda tonight?
I was just going to ask, is this when I say that? Yes, I would like to add a motion to approve the Ramey Leadership Project Rural Internet Connectivity Study, please.
Okay, we will add that under curriculum.
Thank you.
Are there any other, let me write that down before I forget. That will be C6 on our addendum tonight.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Any other additions or corrections to the agenda tonight? Hearing none, we will vote to approve with the addition of the approval of Mr. Staborski's research project. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The agenda is approved. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from December 7th, 2020 organization regular board meeting and the January 11th work session and finance committee meeting.
Josh, so moved.
Tara, second.
Thank you. Any discussion or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, voting to approve the minutes as presented on the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries. At this time, the chair recognizes Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Ken Berlin, for our school reports. Mr. Berlin.
Thanks, Dr. Pushchak. This evening, we're just going to have the principals talk briefly about some of the challenges of remote education, how some of the students are doing, and some of our efforts that we've made to try to keep students engaged. It's been very challenging. As a district, we're not alone. This is a frequent topic with other superintendents when I meet with them. It's very difficult to keep students engaged long distance. So I'll turn things over. We'll start with Mr. Miller, just to share a little bit about how things are going in that area.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Berlin. Tonight, I'm just going to talk briefly, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Englert. We did some looking at the grades of our students, as well as attendance and things like that, because, you know, we had a feeling that the kids weren't faring as well as they typically do, you know, during a normal school year. So Mrs. Kelly, if you want to go to the second slide. So the available in data person that we, or in-person data that we had for our learners, in other words, those students who are in person, and then when we go remote, that, you know, they are remote, but normally they're in-person learners. I took a look back 3 years at the data and basically looked at the halftime of the grades, and you know, it shows that we're pretty consistent across the board during a normal school year at halftime, meaning halfway through the courses. And so 2018, 2019, we were 3 or 4% failure rate, which is pretty normal. About a, you know, 38 to 44% A's, and you know, the rest of the grades fall in there where they're showing. Now, if you look down at the bottom graph down there, you'll see that this year, when we've gone remote, we've been remote about 40 total school days, and we've been in school about 80 days. So it's pretty close to about half the time. But as you can see, our in-person learners are struggling a bit. And right now we're showing 17% Fs, 39% As, which is pretty typical. But what I did look a little bit more deeply at the data, and it does show that the basically it's the B's, C's, and D's students that are kind of sliding down the grading scale a little bit. The kids who typically get A's are still getting A's, but it's the B, C, and D students, you know, the normal student, that's falling a little bit. If you can go to the next slide, Mrs. Kelly. So we also did look, those are our in-person grades. We did look at our cyber students, and they're faring worse really than our other kids. At the end of the first quarter, we had a 61% failure rate, and now it's up to 81%, and that's kind of due to how we looked at the Q1 grades, because they don't really give quarter grades in cyber school. They just give basically end of semester grades. So really right now, forecasting grades, you know, it's kind of inaccurate, but that's all I have right now. I looked at where the kids are progress wise and what their grades are. And if that all stays static between now and January 28th, we would have 81% failures and a very low percentage of D's, C's, B's, and A's. I'm hoping that gets better as we get closer, but right now that's what we're looking at. And then as far as we did also, you know, looking at the whole picture, we surveyed the teachers regarding their curriculum and where they're at. And it did show that about half of our teachers feel that they are on pace to get their curriculum completed. 41% feel they're slightly behind, and 11% feel they're more than slightly behind, which, you know, really with being out for 40 days, I think that's half of our teachers on pace right now is pretty good. If we don't go out again, I'm imagining, you know, those numbers will get better. Next slide. So I also, you know, as part of the curriculum and part of learning is being in school and looking at attendance over the last 3 years. Daily attendance in high school typically is around 95%. This year we're around 92%, which doesn't seem like too much of a drastic decrease, but that's still a lot lower than typically we're experiencing. So Mr. Engler to talk about what we're doing.
Yeah, so basically just to make sure that we're on the same page here, to designate between remote learning and district cyber. So the remote learning is what we're talking about when we started the year for the vast majority of our students using the Teams platform. And so one of the things that we had going on was we were utilizing asynchronous instruction, obviously because of the connectivity issues and things like that. And so we followed the state recommendation to track attendance based upon assignment completion rather than logins. We encouraged students to log in live, but it wasn't mandatory. And so one of the things that we did then, since they didn't have to log in live every day, was gave a 5-day window for assignment completion. So if something was due on a Monday, let's say, we would track attendance the following Monday by seeing if that assignment had been handed in a week later than the due date. We offered some in-person instruction to start the year when we started remote for special education students. And so 1 to 2 days a week, we had sort of a revolving calendar where we brought kids in to just try to give them as much in-person instruction as we could, even in that remote learning, that fully remote learning phase. We did not do this for the 13 days that we were out bracketing the Christmas holiday because we considered that sort of the remote or the red phase of remote instruction. And so we didn't have any students in the building, but we did start it that way. Because we didn't have any in-person instruction during the remote learning around Christmas, over the last couple of weeks here, I've been initiating sort of an academic support for struggling students. And so what that looks like is just coordinating with special education teachers and just students that have traditionally struggled. And it's basically me taking a look at their schedules and seeing if I can pull them out of some elective courses where they're doing well, 1 or 2 days a week, and then moving them into an academic support setting with some core area teachers. Just to give them some one-on-one or close to one-on-one attention to try to get them back on track in some of these classes that they're struggling in. We've also been providing some time during elective periods to work on core classes. And so like some of our gym teachers in the health classes as well, I know in art classes, teachers, and they largely just kind of started this on their own. You know, they were looking at grades for their kids and saying, wow, they need some extra help. And so they were providing additional time during elective courses for kids to get caught up in core areas. Go to the next slide here. As far as our district cyber, the big challenge has been sort of just coordinating with parents and families. And so we required teachers to email progress reports once a week saying, you know, hey, this is where you're at. This is how much of the course that you've completed. This is where you should be. And basically checking in to see if there were any questions. Teachers are available every other day during their cyber instruction period for live questions. If they get questions outside of that time frame, you know, some of them try to answer them at other points during the day, but they do try to get back during that 42 minutes every other day that they have specifically for their cyber courses. We've contacted every family prior to the Christmas break. We had made phone contact or attempted phone contact at least 2 times with every family. And that was done by myself or by a counselor, just trying to reach out and see where there were issues and where there were struggles. This brought some families back, some students back into the building or into remote instruction when we started clarifying some of the details and expectations and things like that as we went along. We also, when we started to see really how much of a struggle it was and kids were falling behind in the cyber instruction, we made the decision prior to the Christmas holiday to try to bring in every cyber learner with a parent or guardian to just sit down and have a meeting face-to-face. One of the challenges, or via Zoom, one of the challenges that we've identified is that, you know, students see one screen, teachers see another screen, and administrators and guidance counselors, we see something else. And so we just thought it was important to bring everybody together to make sure that everyone was on the same page. Those meetings that we did have, we had them in that week that we came back after the holiday, and I thought they were really productive. In some cases, a decision was made by parents and the student to bring a kid back. In other cases, it was just about getting everyone on the same page and really showing parents that, hey, here's what's going on. Because one of the things that we're seeing in the program is that a kid can move through the program and just go through the content, but skip graded assignments. And so as a parent, even if you're trying to pay attention, you could see progress through the course, and yet the grade isn't going up. And so we were able to show like, hey, here's what's going on. Here's how you see when assignments are due. Here's how you identify if your child is on track or not just by taking a look at that progression through the course. We did in some cases allow students to come in 1 day a week for additional help. You know, if they had connectivity issues at home or if they just needed some additional one-on-one instruction. It was kind of the same deal with that academic support that we've been doing the last couple of weeks here. Just bringing them in with some core teachers that would normally be on in-school suspension duty, just trying to give them some more one-on-one instruction time. If we go to the next slide. This was particularly helpful with the Erie County Technical School students, especially when they started in the hybrid model. On the days when they were doing remote instruction, we offered some of them the opportunity to come in and work at the school. So they would finish up their tech school work for the day. And then again, they would have some one-on-one or small group instruction to just come into the building, eliminate some distraction, have reliable internet, and get a little bit of help if they needed it. We've also been visiting a lot of homes. So this has been done by our resource officer, Shelby Chesko, by myself, and by our truancy officer that we share with Harbor Creek, Jason King. when we've not been able to get in touch with families, we've gone literally door to door trying to reach out to them and see if we could help them any way possible. We've also given some leniency in terms of accepting assignments. So we did that with the end of the first quarter, where, you know, we sort of gave the grade for the first quarter based on assignment completion up to November 2nd. And so if they had started off slow or were, you know, had fallen behind a little bit, it gave them a little bit of time to catch up going into the second quarter. To close out the first semester here on January 28th, grades are going to be closed but not finalized. And so at the end of the quarter, the cyber instructors are going to go in and they're going to zero out assignments that were due that haven't been handed in yet. And so that'll give teachers, students, and parents an accurate representation of what their grade would be at the end of the semester. We're then going to give them an additional 2 weeks until February 11th to go back and complete any assignments that they haven't completed to try to get those grades up to a passing grade or up to a, you know, basically where they want it to be, if at all possible. The new semester will begin on January 29th. So they'll be starting their new classes, but they'll still have the opportunity to go back and work in those old classes to lift their grades a bit. The sort of the last step has been, you know, again, going along with those recommendations by the state to track attendance based upon assignment completion. And so for students that aren't logging in or are logging in but aren't completing assignments, we've been sending out letters for truancy and elimination plan meetings. And at these meetings, trying to sit down with parents and sort of make them realize, you know, how this works, what's going on, where the struggles are happening. We've got a bunch of those coming up next week. And, you know, letting them know like what the next step is beyond that, because that's sort of the final step before filing truancy charges. And so in some cases we have had to file truancy charges, and we may have to do that a little bit more here. But my goal and my approach to that has been, you know, that obviously it's sort of the final straw, the last effort. And usually that's something that finally gets parents' attention. And I've been getting phone calls when that happens. And my approach to that has always been, you know, to try to work with those families. And so you know, I guess when I frame that conversation with them, you know, my thought process is we want to go into this working together. So let's put together a plan between now you receiving the letter and going to court over this. So we go into court, we say, hey, here's the plan going forward. Here's what we're going to do to get your student back on track. And if you can show that you stuck to that plan up to the court hearing, my recommendation in working with Judge Strohmeyer is always to hold those fines in abeyance as long as the student stays on track. And so I think that's been helpful, you know, and trying not to create an us versus them mentality when we've got to, you know, go to this final straw here, but continuing to work together with these families. I think we've gotten better at this every stage of the way. The way that we started this in the fall, we were light years ahead of where we were in the spring last year. The 3 weeks around Christmas there, we were better than we were in the fall. And every time we meet with students and parents, I think, again, we're gathering more information. So we're trying to adjust things slightly to make it easier on the cyber end. At the faculty meeting on Wednesday, we're going to get together with field ed instructors and adjust a few things for the second semester to make it easier to find information, to find due dates when they log into their classes. So for example, when they log in for the second semester, any cyber course that students log into, the first thing that they're going to see is a pacing guide. And it's going to show what assignments are due and when for the entire course. So there won't be any searching for that information. So little things like that are things that have come out of the meetings that we've had with these cyber kids and their parents, just, you know, continue that conversation, trying to figure out where the struggles are. And so, you know, basically, like I said, I think we try to get better at this every time we go through the process, and just continue to adapt as we see, you know, especially with those cyber kids, this has been a struggle. And so I think the way that we've approached this every step of the way is, how do we get better and how do we address some of those struggles? And the more conversations that we have, I think the easier that gets. So that's all I've got. I don't know if there's any questions for Keith or I.
Are there any questions for our high school administrators? Thank you both, Mr. Miller, Mr. Englert.
Hi, this is Tara. I don't have a question. I just want to recognize the effort that you are all putting in. This is really amazing that you're taking the time to, especially going door to door. I think our parents should appreciate that and help us in any way they can to help the kids get their grades back up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Pound.
I have a quick question.
Yes, Mr. Blazer.
Yeah, thank you for that report, both of you. It was very informative. I guess I'm curious, seeing those cyber projected numbers that Mr. Miller went over to 81%, potentially getting an F. Obviously, you guys know that those are really ugly. So what does that equate to in terms of actual students? Like how many cyber students do we have at the high school, and what does some of those numbers look like as far as who is performing, poorly?
Well, I think we have about 60 to 70 cyber students, and those numbers are basically looking at the percentage of courses that are being failed, not the percentage of students who are failing a course, but more is just look at each course's grade for each student, and we total the numbers that way. So in looking at it, almost every student in there has at least one F per se, because right, maybe they're falling, they might show that they have an A or 92 or a B, but they're falling behind on the pacing. So if they don't pick up the pace, they're going to fail the class. So it's really, like I said, just it looks at each course, not individual students necessarily, although we are looking at individual students.
So with those percentages, were you saying that means 81% are not getting through all the content, not that they're receiving an F in terms of their performance in the course?
Correct.
Yeah, and I think to get to the heart of your question here, one of the issues that I've been recognizing is just plain and simple, not enough time spent in the course. So that's just something that, again, in framing the conversation with families, when I've met with every family, the number that I've given them is 205. And that's 205 minutes per class per week. And to me, that's the target number. That's approximately what students spend in class, at Seneca High School. And so when I get reports, I see how many minutes they spend in each class each week. And so I'm always framing that conversation with parents. Here's how many minutes your child spent in each of their classes. And just trying to lay out loud and clear what that expectation should look like. If you're on par with a student that's in person, that's approximately the number of minutes that you should be spending in class. And it might be more or less depending on how quickly you can move through that material successfully, but that's sort of the target that I put out there for families.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, Mr. Berlin.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Mr. Englert, Mr. Miller, for trying to proactively work at this. We've said many times, unprecedented situation we're dealing with. So I just wanted to applaud their efforts. We also can hear from Mr. Paris and Mrs. Barboni. That they can share that a lot of what they're doing is the same, but perhaps they could share just some of their numbers and how they're doing.
Mr. Berlin, before we move on, can I ask a quick question, please?
Sure.
Yes, please do.
Okay, I was just wondering, is there a way with the Fuel Ed that the program can be adjusted so that the kids cannot move on until they've answered the graded portions? That would, allow more of an accurate how far they've been through and how successful they've been at that point, instead of getting through the whole entire course, not doing well and having to repeat or spending all that extra time. Is there a way that we can adjust that?
No, it's not really designed that way.
Okay. Okay, that's fair. And also, is there a way that if kids are failing that we can say no more cyber, like they have to come face to face? Is that something that the school district can say, or is it, free choice here? I wasn't sure what the regulations were.
Well, in this situation, that could be something we suggest. But at the onset of this, we know that we wanted to give families a choice to be fully remote during the pandemic. And we, of course, will honor that if that's what they want to do.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, hey, hello everyone. This is Mr. Paris. How's everyone tonight? Just real quick with the middle school, what I did, a little similar to the high school, is I went back pre-pandemic to 2019, 2020, to the first marking period, and see, I did it for 5th and 6th grade and 7th and 8th grade, just to see how the grades were distributed in all the courses during that first marking period. And you can see the breakdown here. The blue is marking period 1 from 2019, 2020. The orange is from this school year, the first marking
Sorry,
period.
is there a way to make this presentation view? These numbers are just a little bit smaller. Sorry. Thank you.
Sorry about that. When I did it
That's
on mine.
okay. Thanks.
Anyway, the orange is marking period 1 from this school year, and you can see the grade distribution for all the courses in 5th and 6th grade. Keep in mind that you know, we were in person for 5 and 6 most of that first marking period, and so the kids were getting, you know, the instruction that they needed during that time. As you can see, the gray bars there, that's marking period 2 from this school year. As of last week, I ran a report, and most of that time has been spent in remote learning during that second marking period. So you can see that you know, the less time the kids are in school, their grades do suffer when not in front of their teachers. Mrs. Kelly, if you can go to the next one. This is 7th and 8th grade. Traditionally, you know, there's less A's in the 7th and 8th grade. You know, the content gets a little bit more difficult. They're expected to do a little bit more, but you can see from these graphs, same thing, marking period 1 from the 2019-20 school year. You can see the number of percent or the number of grades distributed during that time. And each marking period since then, it's gone down a little, you know, quite a bit actually to this second marking period. And the difference here, the 7th and 8th graders, they've only been in person 28 days of about 81 days so far. The rest has been remote, which is a real struggle to get all those, you know, kids online and things like that. And then same thing with our cyber students, same approach I took as a high school. We took all the grades, and these are predicted, they're not, you know, the actual grades, because a student might have an 80% in their course, but they're only about 40% done with the class. So we took that into account. So as of last week, 54% of all classes, there would be an F received in those classes. Mr. Miller talked about pacing a little bit. You know, I talked to a teacher I'm going to observe this week, and we talked about pacing, and she said that, you know, I asked where she was compared to last year, and she said she's behind, and usually she can do, when the kids are in class, she can do 1 lesson per class. When the kids are in remote, it's taken, you know, a class and a half to maybe two classes to get that done, just because there's less kids. You know, because of connectivity when they're on remote. So Mrs. Weehans is going to hit on a couple of things that we're doing for enrichment purposes and interventions.
Hi, good evening. We have been working very closely with the high school. So a lot of what Mr. Englert stated that the high school is doing, we are still doing down at the middle school. We have also been having contacts between the teachers and students, virtually, email. I have also been making contacts. Mr. Paris has also been making contacts, bringing in these students, parents, and meeting with them just so they can see what is going on, explaining the remote learning expectations and guidelines, so they are a little bit more aware of the expectations for their children. We've been also doing home visits. Because we do have an enrichment time, instead of pulling kids out of the specials as they're doing at the high school, we have a little bit more time built into our day that our teachers can focus on some more in-person learning, in-person instruction with our students to give them some of the more individualized instruction that they need. Some of our students with IEPs have been meeting with their case managers and other teachers to make sure that they are getting everything that they need to be successful. In addition, we have been conducting our CDT and Study Island assessments, so we can sort of see where the students are and what they need to focus on during the rest of the year while we are in person. So those assessments really are guiding our instruction, and we have been working with our teachers to make sure that they have that enrichment time really to focus on helping students with assignments and bringing up their grades. Mrs. Kelly.
Let me add one thing on that last slide about the CDTs. We haven't been able to get data on the 7th and 8th graders, or 5th and 6th for that matter, in almost a year. I think the last time they took the CDTs were in February, but since they've been back, we've been able to get the data again, and they're slated to take them again in February, so we'll be able to get some more data from there.
Some of the cyber interventions for FUEL Ed, once again, I am doing weekly progress monitoring by myself, Mr. DeMichael, the teachers. There's constant communication between the teachers and students and administrators. Mr. Paris and I are aware of everything that is going on. I have talked to many parents and students, and I have actually gone into FUEL Ed with them to go through where they're having issues and see what I can do to help them to clarify. We do offer cyber tutors for students with IEPs. Also, like the high school, we did bring students with IEPs into the building 1 to 2 days a week for some personalized instruction. And I have also been conducting conferences with students and parents discussing their progress in the cyber program, offering the option for them to come back to school. And we have had some students come back to in-person learning. They just felt it was time. They were not being successful. Our goal is really to make these kids as successful as they can. And whatever we need to do, we really have been doing it. It's been a team effort down at the middle school. So that's where we are at.
Thank you to Mr. Paris and Mrs. Wehan for presenting on behalf of the middle school. Any questions from the board for Mr. Paris or Mrs. Wehan?
Dr. Pushek, it's Amanda.
Yes, Mrs. Farrow.
This question, I guess, will go for the middle school and for the high school. For the number of students that do currently have an F grade, are you seeing it when they were not in in-person instruction? Are you seeing it more as the work is not being completed, or do you think it's a sense of not understanding what's being presented?
You know, at the middle school, I think it's just a rush to get through it and not submitting it accurately. You know, just not completing the answers like they normally would. I think if they're in school, the kids that are failing do much better with someone in front of them. They like that structure. You know, Mrs. Wehan and I met with the 8th graders last week, and I said, we've all gotten some really bad habits. And I know some sleep in, to miss their morning classes, and that really hurts those kids. So, the teachers are saying, normally the kids would be doing much better because they have that structure in front of them throughout the school day.
I would have to agree with Mr. Paris, especially with some of the cyber ed kids. They're not reading the instructions. They're not going through, I'm trying to encourage them to create a routine as if they were in school, or even if we're in remote, to create a routine and stick to it. So they are being a little bit more successful, a little bit more proactive. And it's difficult. It's difficult whether we're in remote or in they're doing a cyber schooling.
Thank you. Yes, I was just curious. I don't disagree with that. I have a son who I very much have to say multiple times, did you start with instruction number 1 and follow them through? So yeah, I understand. Thank you. And then one other question for, do you have any stats on other districts that are doing the cyber program and how their students are doing kind of in line with ours? I mean, is what we're seeing as a grade trend typical, or is it non-typical? And that's for whomever could answer. I'm not necessarily saying the two of you have to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, just generally, and this is anecdotal, just from meeting with the other superintendents in Erie County twice a month. This is an across the board problem that everyone's dealing with. I don't have specific numbers, unfortunately, but we're definitely not alone. This is very, very troubling issue across all of Erie County school districts.
Mr. Berlin, so across all school districts, whether they're doing a program like Fuel Ed or if they're using their own faculty and staff to conduct the cyber program, has there been much difference between that any of the districts are seeing or reporting?
You know, I can't speak to that. I don't have any numbers to back that up. But just anecdotally, what I'm getting from my colleagues is all the students are doing more poorly than they normally would.
Thank you.
Any more questions for our middle school principals? Hearing none, let's go ahead and move on to the elementary center.
Good evening, everybody. Again, I don't want to go back and reiterate everything that's been said at the high school level and the middle school level, but so much of what they said, it applies across the board. And we are also offering the 5 days for students to complete their work when we are remote. So that's across the board. We are noticing the same things that our students who are on IEPs are tending to have more problems. So we've offered tutoring as well for them. Just a lot of the same things that we're saying from high school and middle school as well. I know Mr. Calabrese is going to touch a little more on our truancy issues, which have certainly increased, and how he's been working very close with Officer Chesko, to reach out to those students. I think what's different at an elementary center and for us with what we're seeing is that we tend to have more parent involvement because these are smaller kiddos. And so the parents are tending to be with the students more and helping them get online. So there is that involvement. So we have that advantage. So when I talked with the teachers, I did a poll this week and just said to them, give me your feedback. What's working? What needs to be changed? And so when we were talking about just when the whole entire school goes remote, we've made a point of our teachers have to have, because we have morning meetings, community is so huge at an elementary center, we still do that in the morning. So we start off with a morning meeting, we have those questions with students, and then we do live teaching for the lessons, and then there are lessons that they complete online. So it kind of varies day to day with what will be done live and how much time is spent live and how much can be spent independently. But we always have those live touches throughout the day to then come back and talk about how was that math assignment or how was this language art. So the real-time meetings that we're having are working very well. We have a lot of attendance from our students. Mr. Calabrese and I have been on several times, and you'll see, it looks as much like the classroom as it possibly can. They have their supplies, they're holding up their whiteboards, they're answering the teachers in real time. Those sessions are recorded as well, which I think really helps our families who are working, because we do have kiddos who are in daycare during the day and they're trying to complete these assignments with like YMCA or daycare personnel, and those personnel are helping them the best they can. Obviously, they're not teachers, and we don't want them to act that way, but we do appreciate them being there and guiding them. But then if students aren't getting the material, they can go back and look at the recorded sessions. And then our teachers also have, after regular hours, availability through email and by phone to help the students as well too. But really about 80%, our teachers were saying, of the kiddos do complete their assignments that day and get them done. We do have some who will take the 5 days or take time to complete. We've found for us the best thing is to just be right on the kiddos. If we're noticing that they're not completing assignments, the teachers are real good about contacting Mr. Calabrese and I. The first line of defense is for them to contact the families, let the parents know what's going on, see if there's an issue. Is it the work? Is it too hard? Does something need to be retaught? So we really take it individually and on a case-by-case basis. And then we, if need to, we do those home visits too, just as the other schools were saying. What helps with us too, when we are on remote, is because what we notice at the elementary center level, because we are either all in person minus our kids who are on the fuel ed program, or we're remote, or that whole classroom is remote. So, our teachers aren't teaching in the classroom and then doing team sessions for kids who are home. If you're home and you're sick with COVID, or you've been a close contact to someone, then unfortunately you're just receiving, packets as we would do for any child who is normally sick. So what does work when we are all on remote is that every child's receiving that. So even a child who is sick or out with COVID, they're now actually getting more instruction from the teachers that way. So the virtual works for us in that way. One of the other things that's really been working well for us with teams, with our 3rd and 4th graders, we can't really put those kids in small groups like we normally do when we're here together at school. And that's a big part of learning at the elementary level, is just having that time for kiddos to collaborate. So they've become, the teachers and the students have become extremely savvy at going to the teams' breakout rooms. So that's worked wonderful for us. And actually, when we are in person now, we're doing that more often too. So we can kind of get back into that small group learning. You could hit the next slide for me, please, Mrs. Kelly. Thank you. So some of the issues, like we were saying, we do have parent participation and that helps us. But if we have kiddos who don't have that, and sadly we have those kiddos, mom and dad are both working, maybe they're a little intimidated by technology, kiddos are at daycare. If they miss those live sessions, we really do notice a decrease in their grades. Some of our kiddos who, they're young kiddos, some of them do have diagnoses, some of them don't, they're just young kiddos and they have a hard time really staying and attending with us online. So again, when that happens, we have to contact them because we are noticing a drop in their grades significantly. But we are trying to be on it. If it's not in within that 5 days, excuse me, we're making contact with the parents. We're asking, we're reaching out, how can we help you? How can we keep this going? So those are really the things that are hard for us. And then especially those kiddos who are behind, once we do come back in person, now that gap is even wider. So we're looking to how do we help them? And like the middle school, we have enrichment time to pull from. And then also, as the high school's doing, for some of our kiddos, we've looked at their individual schedules and we've taken some time from their specials and had them work with other teachers who are willing to tutor and help them during the day. So that's how we've been addressing things. Teachers were just saying, it is a lot of hours to have learned all these different systems with the teams and Seesaw. And I think we're finally getting the hang of it and the swing of it. So I'm hoping, unfortunately, if we do find ourselves remote again, the more we're remote, the better we're getting at it. So, kind of a yin and yang there. We have some trouble with the specials. Some of our kiddos don't participate in them as much as I know they normally would in person. So we're learning to be flexible and work with them individually on that as well. And just that 5-day window that we're doing as a district is sometimes difficult for us. Younger kids, I think maybe giving them that much time isn't as helpful as we had hoped it would be. And maybe giving them a shorter amount of time might help to speed that process up a little more. And that again just leads to that 5 days really leads a lot to the truancy issues that we've been having. On the other part of that, in general, we've had a few connectivity issues. I just want to give a shout out to IT because they've been great with fixing things within a day or two. We're learning a lot more about technology, our students and staff alike. And, that I think is going to help us once we are back in person too, just having that ability, I think will help us kind of move ahead. You can switch to the next one. Thank you. So when talking about our Cyber Academy, again, it's a little different for us because we only have one Cyber Academy teacher. That's Mrs. Holland, and you can switch to her quote here. And I'll let Mr. Calabrese touch on the Cyber Academy because he's been working closely with Mrs. Holland. But I know one of the big differences for us is these kiddos who are in the Cyber Academy have one teacher, have a close relationship with her. I know some of you have her, and you know that she's right on it. So she is in close contact with our families. So I feel from the feedback she's been giving us, that is a strong program for us. And Mr. Calabrese, I'll let you kind of hop in there.
Thanks, Mrs. Barboni. I'm not going to read the entire quote from Mrs. Holland, but if it's up there, like Mrs. Barboni said, having Mrs. Holland from day one has really kind of, I don't want to say it's eliminated a lot of the issues that the high school and middle schooler have as far as attendance and truancy issues go and students falling behind, because Mrs. Holland, that is her full-time dedicated job. Unlike, and nothing against the high school or middle school, but there's such a wide variety of different classes that are being taught up there, and a wide variety of teachers that are all taking on these courses in addition to their in-person courses. It's probably a little harder for them than it is for Mrs. Holland, and she has been on it. I can't speak highly enough about her. She went into this year, she wasn't sure what she was getting herself into after teaching for 30 plus years, and she's really taken a hold of it, and she's done a phenomenal job. So that being said, we still do have 64 students that are enrolled in Fuel Ed. I looked at the percentages and I looked at the numbers, and have been in contact with her, like I said, weekly, if not daily. And we actually only have about a few students that are actually failing courses. And we've reached out to them and have actually, visited their house just to make sure that we were doing everything that we could to support them. We did offer, and like Mr. Englert said a couple of times, and Mr. Berlin mentioned, sometimes if a student is failing, we do recommend, or we could reach out and say, hey, would you like to come back in person? However, due to circumstances, with COVID and family related issues, unfortunately they can't, but Mrs. Holland is going to stay with them, and we're going to get them caught up. Really quick, as far as truancy goes, other than a couple kids that are, having some issues in cyber, a big issue that has kind of come up. Normally truancy isn't that big of an issue at the elementary level. Usually the kids are in school, and the parents, they want to make sure their kids are in school. And however, this year we have had a lot of families that are struggling. I won't get into specifics with the numbers, but we've been having a lot of meetings, these school attendance improvement plan meetings with families. And Mr. Englert hit the nail on the head when he said, it really is, it's not an us versus them mentality. We're working with those parents, and we're saying, hey, we're in this together. I know it's tough. What can we do to help? And we're trying to make sure that we're doing what we can, the teacher's doing what they can, and at the parent or grandparent, aunt, uncle, guardian, whoever is working with those children during the day, that they're doing everything that they can. We've worked with the YMCA. We really are in this together, and these meetings that we've been having with the parents, they've actually been going very, very great. Parents are very understanding. Sometimes they're apologetic and they say, don't worry about it. It's hard. I sometimes relate to them and say, hey, it's a struggle with my own son in 3rd grade. And we really do have a connection. So, hopefully no one ends up in truancy court. And, we really just want to make sure that the kids are doing the best they can. And overall this year, it's been pretty good. And those families that we've had meetings with, we've seen progress, and, most of the families are like, well, hope we stay in school. And I said, I get it. I said, I hope we do too. And we'll just keep doing it. So for those families, at the elementary, middle school, high school, if you ever need to get a hold of your administrator, your teacher, so just give us a call, shoot us an email. We're here for the kids. That's why we got into this profession. So let us know if you need help, and we're here for you.
Thank you, Mrs. Barboni and Mr. Calabrese, speaking on behalf of the Elementary Center. Any questions from the board for Mrs. Barboni or Mr. Calabrese?
Hi, Andy, this is Julie.
Yes, Mrs. Pikevich.
Hey, I just want to say thanks to all the principals for your presentation. I know how hard it is on everybody's end, so I think you guys are doing a good job trying to keep people afloat with your emails and phone calls and home visits, you know, because you're right, we are here for the kids. So I try to help everybody. And I just want to say kudos to all the teachers for all their work and planning and all the new learning and technology that a lot of them have probably had to step up and do just to be a teacher this year. It's not an extra thing or above and beyond, but it's something they had to do to survive. And so that's been probably pretty stressful. The other thing is, you know, I was just comparing the different presentations, but, you know, with elementary, Mrs. Barboni, I agreed with you, like live, the word live is key. You know, when you're in person and you're live with your teacher, that's key. That's when you do the best. And we all know that, and we're going through this pandemic as best we can. But if we do end up back in cyber, you know, as far as middle school to high school, I think using that same idea of live will help some of those kids go from the F's and D's to the C's and B's again, because I see it with a lot of different kids. There's a lot of PowerPoints out there, and that is very hard for kids to get through on their own. Day after day, class after class after class. It's just the same thing kind of over and over and over again, and it's just not engaging. So if we go forward again with the cyber, that would just be one thing I've noticed, just with kids I've been coaching and listening to different things. It's just like, it's the same old thing. It's just a PowerPoint. But when the kids have a teacher that comes online with them and they know that teacher, because I even hear my own kids, oh, so-and-so is going to be on. I got to get ready. I got to get on there. If it's not someone showing up to even say hi for 10 minutes, there's not an engagement. It's just a huge difference to do that mentally and academically for those kids. So I just think that'll be a good thing if we go back just more live. But thank you, everybody. It's been a roller coaster.
Thank you, Mrs. Pikevich.
Dr. Pushak, this is Amanda. I just have a quick question.
Sure, Mrs. Farrell, go ahead.
As a follow-up to Julie's comments, is that at the teacher's discretion of if they're coming online or not?
I can only speak for the elementary center, and I just want to clarify, we are not teaching from 9 to 3 live. That is not what is transpiring. What we have are live touches with our students. So we have a live morning meeting. So like maybe 15 or 20 minutes, depending on how many kiddos show up and have a live morning meeting. Then maybe, for example, for ELA that day, they'll say, I'll see you at 10 o'clock for ELA. And there might be a live session for ELA for 10 or 15 minutes, going over something, reviewing it, kind of like Julie was saying, Mrs. Pikevich, excuse me, was saying, you know, giving them that time for any questions, explaining the assignments, and then things that they're working on their own, they can go ahead and work at their own pace, but which is how things tend to be done in the classroom too. And then if kids need help, then they can email and or call the teacher. So we're having these live touches and moments throughout the day where kids know the teachers are available live for them to have that chance to talk to them and ask questions for their own self and for the good of the other students who attend the meetings as well.
I would like to comment also, our teachers have all been live as well. They're, Mr. Paris and my calendars are filled with class meetings and live events with all of our teachers every single day when we are in remote. So I do know that some teachers are teaching the whole 90 minutes online. Some of them are doing what their direct instruction would be, and then sending some of them to breakout rooms. Some of them are, you know, doing a small activity online and then letting them work individually and contact them. But you know, by far our teachers really are putting themselves out there and teaching online every day that we have been in remote.
Yeah, the same is true of the high school. We made it a requirement for the time period that we were in remote bracketing Christmas break. And again, that was part of getting better, just identifying that was a need and kids had a hunger for that. So some of them were doing it from the get-go, but everyone was doing it for the last time we were in remote.
Well, I just want to thank everyone, as has been stated, particularly the principals for presenting tonight, but also the teachers and the aides and everyone else that goes into trying to do the best we can for our students. Now that we have several items identified, we can count on our principals and teachers to work towards them for the betterment and the success of our students. So I really thank everyone on behalf of this board for the efforts being made. Anything else under school reports this evening, Mr. Berlin?
No, that's all we had. We thought it was important, that the board and the community be aware of some of the challenges and how we're working on those. And I can say the same thing. Kudos to all the teachers for learning so much new stuff, and kudos to the principals, but most importantly to the students that are working hard. Sooner or later we'll be back to normal. We all look forward to that, but in the meantime, we've got to make the best we can do with what we have.
Okay, thank you for those school reports this evening, everyone. That brings us to guest and citizens comment. We have one citizen that has signed up to address the board, and that's Danny Carter. Mr. Carter, are you on the call? I do not see Mr. Carter as being in attendance this evening. And no one else has signed up to address the board this evening, so we will move on with our agenda to the superintendent's report. The chair recognizes Mr. Ken Berlin, superintendent of schools. Mr. Berlin.
Thanks, Dr. Pushchak. Mrs. Kelly, if you could allow me to share my screen. This will be brief, but as I have been doing since this started, I'm trying to get as much weekly data in front of the board and the staff as possible. The good news here is that we're not seeing the post-holiday spike, at least not the size that some of the professionals were predicting. We still are in substantial spread. When I look at the dashboard, we've got 14% positivity and 358 cases per 100,000 residents, and that's for Erie County as a whole. And these numbers need to be down below 110, respectively, to get us out of this substantial spread. The numbers, we have a team of contact tracers, and we have it's becoming an enormous shared spreadsheet that everyone updates daily. So I can almost in real time tell you how many cases we have, how many people are quarantined, and so on. And this is just a quick summary. You can see that this is a 14-day look back period. And it does look like there's 3 cases at the elementary, but that's a little deceiving. 2 of those cases started right before Christmas break ended. There's really, and those students had never been in the building. So really, we've only had 1 case at the elementary, 1 at the middle school student-wise, and then we've had 2 staff members as well. So 19 folks with a positive household member or a contact, and you can see the rest of the numbers there. These are holding steady for the time being, which is good news. And this is just that chart. I've shared it many times. If we get 2 to 4 students in one building, then we need to start looking at a temporary closure, depending on what mode we're in here. So in substantial, it might be 3 to 7 days, but we can work with the health department depending on the particulars of the case. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a full 7 if we can do it in less time. This is just the weekly health department spreadsheet that they share with all the school districts. So you can see, like everyone else in the state, all 64 counties, I believe, remain insubstantial. This is the sewage wastewater plant study that gets updated weekly, and Dr. Nadworthy from the Allegheny Health Network has been spearheading this project. And it's interesting, you can see how the trend is going. And then if you look at the Erie County trend line here, that's the red line. It looks just like the sewer waste treatment study numbers. So the bottom line is we feel this is a pretty good metric for what's going on in the area as a whole. But you can see our cases so far have declined or remain rather negligible within our school district borders. This is just a little history chart I started putting together so we can kind of see at a glance when our kids have been in school and when they've been out. And this is available on eriecounty.gov, and you can see the weekly totals. And this is good news here. As of 1/11, and we didn't see that spiking. So hopefully that trend will continue. And then here's just a brief look at Erie County as a whole. And again, they've broken it down into 4 zones. And we remain in zone 4 near the bottom percentage of cases, as we have since the pandemic started. This number declined from last week as well. This is an assessment planning tool. So if you had a gathering of 50 people in the district, there'd be a 57% chance that one person would be positive. Last week that was up into the 70s. I've seen it as high as 90. So this is good news for the moment as well. So I'll stop my screen sharing there. That's just a quick overview. We seem to be holding our own, taking things at a week at a time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berlin, for your continued efforts to stay on top of that for us. Any questions for the superintendent regarding his report?
I just have one quick question, Mr. President.
Mr. Blazer.
So, Mr. Berlin, the numbers that you report on for the school district related, so students and staff that are either quarantining for different reasons or positive, are those all self-reported from the families to the district, or are you getting that directly from the health department?
Oh, good question, Mr. Blazer. Originally, we were receiving confirmation from the health department back in September, but they became overwhelmed and they essentially handed that task of tracking everyone to us. So we fortunately, we had several staff members, Mrs. Wehan and our nurses, Mrs. Ray and Mrs. Smith, they took the COVID contact tracing class at Johns Hopkins University this summer. And then, so we rely on their expertise to track all these, but the short answer, I guess, I'm getting a little long-winded, is that it's self-reporting. We're at the, we really depend on families to tell us what's going on. And they've been very good about that.
Okay, thank you again, Mr. Berlin, for your report. Moving on with the agenda, the chair recognizes Mrs. Vicky Bendig for the Business Administrator's Report. Mrs. Bendig.
Thank you, Mr. President. For tonight, all the reports that were presented at last week, Treasurer's Report, cash in the bank as of December 31st, $11,073,459.26. And then I also have the year-to-date budget versus actual report. So that shows that as of December 31st, 2020, again, reminding everyone that's about halfway through the year, we have received about 67% of our projected revenue at around $17.5 million. And then expenses, again, through 50% of the year, there are a couple of overspent categories, mostly due to grant funding, which we're also looking at a budget amendment for those, and some other items that are on the budget versus actual report. But trending at the end of that report, we've spent approximately 38% of our budgeted expenditures and at about just under $10 million year to date. So moving on, I have the capital projects treasurer's report, cash in the bank and the capital projects fund as of December 31st, $30,301.62. The cafeteria treasurer's report, cash in the bank as of December 31st, 2020, $177,276.69. And that leads us to the cafeteria profit loss report in November. If you'll remember, that report wasn't ready at the last December meeting. So profit for the month of November was $3,804.18. And then profit as of December 31st, December 31st, 2020, $5,977.07. Moving on to the bill lists, checks already written from the last meeting, $559,121.82. That's quite large due to the fact that there was not a meeting in the middle of December. So those are obligations that we had between December 3rd and the work session. Exhibit A2, checks written since the work session, between the work session and now, $17,308.48. Exhibit A3, the general fund bills totaling $335,790.37 for the January board bills. Exhibit B1 are the cafeteria checks already written, $27,998.11. Cafeteria bills for this month, $31,814.01. There's a capital projects fund bills, $20,500. I believe that was for the fencing, to complete the fencing project around the athletic complex and the retention pond. And then the Seneca High School Activity Fund, cash in that account is $73,975.23. And that is all I have for this evening.
Thank you, Madam Business Administrator. I'll entertain a motion to approve the reports, payments, and invoices as presented.
This is Amanda.
Marty, so moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions for the Business Administrator regarding her report? Hearing none, voting to approve the reports, payments, and invoices as presented. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion carries. Thank you, Mrs. Bendig. There is nothing under legal advisement for this evening's meeting. The chair recognizes Mr. Marty Pushchak for finance. Mr. Pushchak.
Thank you, Mr. President. 6 items under finance tonight. We'll begin with F1 regarding the preliminary general fund budget for the 21-22 school year. We're looking to approve the accelerated budget opt-out resolution that certifies that the tax rate will remain within the inflation index, and therefore there will be no need to comply with the Act 1 accelerated budget procedures for the 21-22 general fund budget as outlined in Exhibit E. So moved.
Josh, second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion regarding the preliminary general fund budget? Just to remind the board, if you vote yes, this means that we will agree not to raise taxes if we do raise taxes above the index. If you vote no, you're saying you would like to raise taxes above the index. So just that little reminder to the board. Any further discussion regarding F1? Hearing none, may we have a roll call, please, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Pushchak,
Yes.
Mr. Blazer,
Yes.
Mrs. Farrell,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Paris,
Yes.
Mrs. Pekevich,
Yes.
Mrs. Pound,
Yes.
Dr. Pushchak.
Yes, and the motion carries. Thank you.
F2 regarding a budgetary transfer, looking to approve the monthly budgetary transfer from the budget versus actual report as outlined in Exhibit F. So moved.
Amanda, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on F2 budgetary transfers? Hearing none, voting to approve F2. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries.
F3, looking to approve the budgetary amendment as outlined in Exhibit G. So moved.
Josh, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on F3 budgetary amendment? Hearing none, voting to approve F3 budgetary amendment. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion carries.
F4, regarding compensation for tax collectors, looking to approve the resolution to set the compensation rate for the collection of real estate taxes levied by the district as per Section 36.1 of the local tax collection law to be effective during the term of office for the elected tax collectors commencing January 1st, 2022, as outlined in Exhibit H. So moved.
Josh, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on F4 compensation for tax collectors? Hearing none, voting to approve. May we have a roll call, please, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Pushcheck,
Yes?
Mr. Blazer,
Yes.
Mrs. Farrell,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Paris,
Yes.
Mrs. Bekevich,
Yes.
Mrs. Pound,
Yes.
Dr. Pushcheck.
Yes, and the motion carries. Thank you.
Next, F5, looking to approve the IRS mileage rate of 56 cents per mile for business travel effective January 1st, 2021, as outlined in Exhibit I. So moved.
Nicole, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the IRS mileage rate, F5? Hearing none, voting to approve F5. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion carries.
For F6, I'll direct you to the addendum, looking to approve the statement of work agreement between Serenic Software and the Wattsburg Area School District to upgrade the district's Serenic software as outlined in Attachment 1. So moved.
Nicole, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the technology agreement here? Hearing none, voting to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion carries.
That's all I have under finance tonight, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Pushcheck. The chair recognizes Mr. Josh Parrish for Buildings and Grounds. Mr. Parrish.
Thank you, Mr. President. No items.
Thank you, Mr. Parrish. The chair recognizes Mr. Jeremy Blazer for Personnel. Mr. Blazer.
Thank you, Mr. President. First item under personnel is P1, Kelly substitute additions, to approve the names listed on the agenda and the addendum as well for the Kelly Education staffing substitute list.
Is there a second?
Josh, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the Kelly substitute additions, including one on the addendum? One addition. Hearing none, voting to approve P1 Kelly substitute additions. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
P2 is for tuition reimbursement. The motion to approve the tuition reimbursements as outlined in the attachment.
Marty,
Josh,
second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the tuition reimbursement? Hearing none, voting to approve P2. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion carries.
P3, resignations. The motion to accept the resignation for purpose of retirement of Donald Pierce effective January 5th, 2021.
Amanda, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the resignation? I did just want to say that I'll personally accept this resignation with regret. Mr. Pierce was a wonderful person, coach, educator, impacted a lot of our students positively, and he'll be greatly missed, and we certainly wish him well. Any further discussion on P3? Hearing none, voting to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
P4 for appointments, the motion to approve the following appointments: Michael Rimzius, long-term substitute for Seneca High School, and Amanda Werner as support aide, effective 2021.
Nicole, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on P4 appointments? Hearing none, voting to approve P4. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion carries.
And P5, leave requests, to approve the following leave requests: extended disability leave of absence as per Wattsburg Education Association collective bargaining unit agreement for Todd Talbot, as well as leave of absence for Brittany Smiley, using family medical leave of absence anticipated through June 14, 2021, and leave of absence for James Caspar, utilizing family medical leave absence beginning January 19th of 2021.
Is there a second?
Josh, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on P5, the leave requests? We certainly wish these 3 employees the best on their leaves and wish them well. Voting to approve P5 leave requests. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries.
That's all I have tonight, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Blazer. The chair recognizes Mrs. Amanda Farrell for policy. Mrs. Farrell.
Thank you. One item, PL1, which is the first reading of the below policies. Motion to approve policy 103, the first reading of these policies. Policy 103, discrimination. Title IX, sexual harassment affecting students. Policy 203, immunizations and communicable diseases. Policy 209, health examination screenings. Policy 218.3, discipline of student convicted, adjudicated of sexual assault. Policy 317.1, educator misconduct. Policy 705, facilities and workplace safety. Policy 803, school calendar. Policy 824, maintaining professional adult/student boundaries. Policy 904, public attendance at school events. Policy 907, school visitors. So moved.
This is Jeremy,
Nicole-
second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the policies of the first readings of those policies presented on the agenda? Hearing none, voting to approve PL1. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion carries. Thank you, Mrs. Farrell. The chair recognizes Mrs. Julie Pikevich for curriculum. Mrs. Pikevich.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's several items under curriculum tonight on this agenda as well as the addendum. A motion to approve C1 homebound instruction.
Is there a second?
Amanda, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on C1 homebound instruction? Hearing none, voting to approve. All in favor of C1, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Okay, under C2, a motion to approve academic services.
Thank you. Thank you. Any discussion on the approval of academic services? Hearing none, voting to approve C2. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
C3, a motion to approve the revised preliminary contract for Title I service agreement.
Nicole,
Josh, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on C3? Hearing none, voting to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Okay, and then on the addendum, there's C4, motion to approve the school calendar for the 2021-2022 school year and August 31st and September 1st as Act 80 days for dismissal at the start of the school year for a partial group of kindergarten students as outlined in attachment 2.
This is Jeremy, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the school calendar for the following academic year? Hearing none, voting to approve the school calendar for 2021 and 2022 school year. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you. C5, a motion to approve the affiliation agreement for academic field experience between Gannon University and Wattsburg Area School District as outlined in attachment 3, please.
Josh, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the Gannon affiliation agreement? Hearing, none, voting to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Okay, and then we had an addition. It would be C6, a motion to approve the Ramey Leadership Project Rural Internet Connectivity Study.
Jeremy, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the study to be conducted in the district? Hearing none, voting to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Good job, Mrs. Pikevich. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. President.
The chair recognizes Mrs. Tara Pound for technology. Mrs. Pound.
Thank you. I have nothing for this week.
Thank you, Mrs. Pound. The chair recognizes Mrs. Nicole Lee for transportation. Mrs. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have one item under the addendum. It is T1, Durham Transportation Agreement. Motion to approve the Durham Transportation Agreement as outlined in the attachment.
Jeremy, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the Durham Transportation Agreement? Hearing none, may we have a roll call, please, Madam Secretary?
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Paris,
Yes.
Mrs. Bekevich,
Yes.
Mrs. Pound,
Yes.
Mr. Pushcheck,
Yes.
Mr. Blazer,
Yes.
Mrs. Farrell,
Yes.
Dr. Pushcheck.
Yes, and the motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Lee.
Thank you.
Recognizes Mr. Sean Mattson for athletic and extracurricular. Mr. Mattson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 2 items under athletic and extracurricular this evening, plus an addition on the addendum. The first is AE1, the game help list. A motion to approve the addition of Ryan Denard to the game help list for the 2020-2021 school year. So moved.
Julie, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on AE1 game help list? Hearing none, voting to approve AE1. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Okay, and then we have AE2, athletic resignations. A motion to accept the following resignations for Ryan Murphy, first assistant football coach, effective January 6, 2021. Derek Peterman, other assistant football coach, effective January 6, 2021. Kim Brain, second assistant girls soccer, effective January 7th, 2021. And then on the addendum, Kyle Forty, second assistant 7th and 8th grade jumping, effective January 14th, 2021. And Alyssa Forty, second assistant 7th and 8th grade sprint and hurdles, effective January 15th, 2021. So moved.
Jeremy,
Nicole.
Thank you. Any discussion on AE2 athletic resignations? Hearing none, voting to approve AE2. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries, and thank you, Mr. Mattson.
Mr. President.
We have one item under miscellaneous this evening. I'll entertain a motion to declare items as surplus as outlined in Exhibit V.
Julie, second.
That'll be a motion, Mrs. Piquet. Is there a second?
Josh, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the items to be declared as surplus? Hearing none, voting to approve M1. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Erie County Technical School, Mrs. Nicole Lee is recognized for a few items we need to vote on tonight. Mrs. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we have 2 items to look at tonight. The first one is ECT-1. This is the Mill Creek School District modification of the Erie County Technical School Resolution Questionnaire. It is a 3-part questionnaire. And the motion is to approve the Mill Creek Township District modification of Erie County Technical School questionnaire as outlined in Exhibit W.
And as discussed at the work session, we're to vote on all 3 of these at once. A yes vote is a yes for all 3. A no vote is a no for all 3, unless the board would like to separate any. And I apologize. Was there a second to the motion?
I'll second, Jeremy.
Thank you. Now we can discuss it. Any discussion? Just reminding the board for this first resolution, ECT-1, we're going to vote on all 3 questions. Any further discussion? Hearing none, may we have a roll call, please, Madam Secretary?
Mrs. Lee,
No.
Mr. Mattson,
No.
Mr. Paris,
No.
Mrs. Bekevich,
No.
Mrs. Pound,
No.
Mr. Pushcheck,
No.
Mr. Blazer,
No.
Mrs. Farrell,
No.
Dr. Pushcheck.
No, the motion fails.
And the last one that we have is ECT-2. It is the PennDOT resolution for installation of roundabout. The motion is to approve a resolution for PennDOT's installation of a roundabout on Erie County Technical School property as outlined in Exhibit X. So moved.
Jeremy, second.
Thank you. And just a reminder from our work session, the way that our school district is listed several different times based upon the deed and how they were listed before, but they all do recognize the Wattsburg Area School District. So any further discussion on EC2 approving the roundabout with Wattsburg getting their portion of the proceeds from the sale? Hearing none, voting to approve. May we have a roll call, please, Madam Secretary?
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Paris,
Yes.
Mrs. Pakevich,
Yes.
Mrs. Pound,
Yes.
Mr. Pushcheck,
Yes.
Mr. Blazer,
Yes.
Mrs. Farrell,
Yes.
Dr. Pushcheck.
Yes, and the motion carries. Thank you for those two items, Mrs. Lee. Anything else to report for the Erie County Technical School tonight?
Not right now. I'm sure Mr. Berlin or I will have an update soon as all the votes are coming in from all the districts.
Thank you, Mrs. Lee. I'll recognize myself for the Northwest Tri-County Intermediate Unit report. I did want to report just a couple of items. The IU is leading the effort to coordinate the local distribution of vaccines for educators and school employees. So we're hoping that we'll hear more about that soon, particularly for our school district employees. And then I am once again serving as the lead negotiator for the IU board. I've done that in the past for 4 of their contracts, and I've been asked to do it again. And we are entering into negotiations with the aides and interpreters. So we look forward to working with that unit of the IU. Our next meeting will be January 27th, so I will have a report at the February meeting.
Yeah,
So-
Dr. Pushchak, I could just add a little bit to the vaccination effort.
Yes, please,
Um,
Mr. Berlin.
Yeah, last week, all the school districts in Erie County were asked by the IU and the health providers to survey our people regarding who will take a vaccine. So that process is moving along. They're trying to move educators to the front of the vaccination line here over the next few weeks. So hopefully that continues to move along, and I'll update the board accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Berlin, for that update. I have nothing else to report from the Northwest Tri-County Intermediate Unit. That brings us to board correspondence and dialogue. Tonight, I just wanted to thank the board for their service, as January is School Board Recognition Month. I recognize my school board colleagues for their dedication to the students and families and community of our school district. And I certainly thank you for all the hard work, and you are really a great group to work with. And I think we're doing great things for our students, families, and communities. So thank you, and you've been recognized for your board service. Anything else under board correspondence and dialogue this evening?
I had a question, Mr. President.
Mr. Blazer.
So at our work session, when we were talking about the finances, our vote tonight to not exceed the tax issue coming up for the next year, and all those challenges on some of our fixed costs, such as our contribution to the retirement that continues to climb, and our healthcare costs. I was curious, are there any efforts, and then the other thing that Mr. Berlin mentioned was that these charter schools that were sending a good million, I think at least dollars of our funds to help educate a small number of students and not educate them all that greatly through those companies. He mentioned that they had lobbyists and that they're, actively working on our legislators. I guess I wondered, is there any effort in Erie County to, all the other districts might have different financial backgrounds and setups of their constituents, and yet we all face those same challenges. So I wondered, does the IU pull together anything like that? Is there any efforts looking at lobbying from a school district perspective so that our legislators better understand the challenges we face and that are only going to climb? I guess I wanted to figure out what is the best way to, team up with others that are having these same issues that we are and figure out if there is a way of getting more information or get out to our legislators. And I know we're also trying to educate our own voting base on why it is that our school district budget continues to climb every year. So I know a lot packed in there, but I was just curious of what could be done or it has been done.
Well, yeah,
I'll take the first swath, Mr. Berlin, if I can.
Yep, go ahead.
Pennsylvania School Boards Association is a large lobbying presence, and this is actually on their agenda that they approve each year on what are the topics. This is at or near the top is charter school finance reform. So as a state level group that has much more pull than local levels do, the Pennsylvania School Boards Association is a lobbying presence and does propose legislation to address this. So that's one issue. The other issues I'll let Mr. Berlin address.
Yeah, I can tell you what's been done so far locally. The superintendents of Erie County, we have a legislative phone call meeting, depending on who can attend, with our legislators about once a month. And one of the good developments here is Kurt Sonny is now he's a representative from our area, and he is head of the education committee. He's the chairperson. That's a very powerful position because education does consume such a large portion of the state budget. And we do have his ear on the charter school issue. He's went so far as to draft several bills to reorganize how charter schools are funded. And he's not been successful to date, but he's got another version in the hopper, and he's told us that that's one of his number one priorities this year is to get some motion, some traction with the charter school funding reform. So that's a very positive development.
Thank you.
Anything else for board correspondence and dialogue tonight? And thank you for your remarks, Mr. Berlin. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting tonight.
Josh, so moved.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Everyone, please have a safe trip home. Good night, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight.